Well then, welcome to today's episode of Flow Meter Guy, where the currents of wit and wisdom flow as we explore the journeys of people building successful and unique businesses. Well then, today we're diving deep into the crucial world of data-driven decision making. You know, that can spell success or setbacks for your business. Now, forget about all that AI buzz. No, we're rolling up our sleeves to uncover the power of the data you've already possessed or should be gathering. Our guest is Ritavan, who is an entrepreneurial technology leader with a decade of experience focused on data-driven business impact. He has authored peer-reviewed papers, given talks at global conferences, and holds an international patent. Known for his first principles approach to building and scaling data-driven solutions across industries. He combines deep technical expertise with strategic vision and an execution-focused mind. Now, his latest book, Data Impact, offers actionable insights to fuel your business growth. Well then, Ritavan, thank you for joining me today, and we're very eager to delve into data impact and uncover how its principles can empower our listeners. And first off, is this your first name? Is this your last name? Tell us about that.
Thanks, Brent. Great to be on. Yes, I have actually one name, and there's a little bit of story. There's a little story to that. So some historical context. The first and last name structure is about a couple hundred years old. It's around the French Revolution, or the spread of colonization in the world, that you needed a first and last name for taxation purposes. Because if you go back a couple hundred years, you were Brent, son of John, right? Or you were, everyone knew everyone because people were not moving around that much, and if they were, then they would have a nom de guerre or some other title. And so this formalization to first name, last name is a couple of centuries old, and I have an Indian origin, and so the context there was there were already kind of social structures along professional lines, along tribe and community, and like anywhere else, right? And what happened then with the formalization of first name, last name is the last name over time became a bit like an encoding of your social context. So today, if you meet people who are in the know, with the last name you can really predict a lot about a person. So like which region are they from, what language do they probably speak, what religion are they from, etc. And so what that led to over time is the concretization or the abuse of the last name for discrimination. And about a century ago, my grandfather was part of a social reform movement, and he was a young doctor, and a whole bunch of people in that generation said, let's drop the last name because we want to treat every individual as an individual and not as part of some social construct. And I still believe in that idealism. So it's a bit annoying administratively sometimes. Surprisingly, I've never had problems at airports, but like for some paperwork, it's a little annoying. But I really believe in that idealism. I think we should really treat every individual for who they are, and it shouldn't matter, what language they grew up speaking, or what they eat at home, or how they pray. I think every individual deserves the respect and to be treated
there you go.
for who they are.
There you go. How excellent. How excellent. Well, that would just start calling me Brent, or my other name's Flow Meter Guy, which is a couple of words. Well, needless to say, that was most interesting. So where'd you go to school?
In Pondicherry, the southeast coast of India. That's where I was born to.
Long time. So that's where you went to school, and then obviously you must have had some higher education, because I took a note from the book there that you had very interesting time in school, and you must have been an excellent student because of all your data analytic background. In fact, I have a quote from your book. Your English teacher used to call you bonsai master. Tell me about Bonsai Master from your English teacher.
uh, thanks for taking the time to read the book, Brent. I really appreciate that. So the Bonsai Meister story is when I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and we had a really good English teacher, a young guy, and he would ask us to write essays on certain topics, and um, and I really struggled to write. I mean, I think um, I enjoy discussion. I think while speaking. That's why I really love podcasts, and I'm really excited about the book launch podcast tour.
Mhm.
But I really struggled to write, and in that sense, also writing this book was very hard because if you put me in front of a blank, piece of paper, or you put me in front of a blank Word document, I just freeze. My mind stops working, and so I really struggled to write. And so what would happen is I would have a lot of thoughts, and when it came down to writing the essay, I would write half a page, and that was it. And I would kind of condense everything into half a page. And so he would joke because my classmates would like hammer out pages, several pages. I would just freeze after half a page or so. And so yeah, I just wanted to I brought that up at the end of the book, in the final chapter, just to say, when you have clarity around what you want to achieve and you have the courage to execute, then even the bonsai master can write a whole 200 plus page book. So
Yeah,
so it was a bit
yeah.
just it's just to say, look, sometimes we all struggle with certain things, but if you go at it correctly, I think you will inevitably then succeed.
This book in your mind, how long has you had this book in mind to write? Is this something you just said, let's sit down and write, or you've been thinking about this for the last 10 years?
I started thinking about writing it just 5 months ago, but it's been brewing, I think, in me in different forms. At least a decade of operating experience,
Mhm.
learnings, also say scars. I mean, I just tried a lot of times. I tried to
Stars.
do stuff, both in terms of thinkers and operators, and I try to put that into a unique kind of framework and approach that I try to make as useful as possible. Like, my objective in writing this book is not to tell a nice story or to purely entertain you. It's really to give you a useful framework that you can use and apply day to day.
So again, let's hold that up. What's the name of your new book? Can you hold that up? Is that nearby there?
Yes, just got
It's
in the first author copies yesterday.
the
So
first author copies, Data Impact. There you go. And we're going to drill into that, and then we'll tell you the availability of his new book there. I found it very interesting reading. So let's get into it. So let's talk about your journey. So, you went to school, and then how did you migrate into the world that you're in, and moving forward from there? What kind of the first jobs you had to apply some of the education that you had?
but just some context, I think, as I went to an international alternative school that really prioritized learning. Surprisingly, like a lot of
Really?
schooling is so yeah, a lot of schooling. I think from formal schooling is just so structured and so
Yeah.
syllabus and curriculum based, and mine was a little more maverick, a little more Wild West style, in the sense of, especially from the age of, was it 15 or so onwards. I opted into an even more radical part of the school where you had complete freedom to choose what you wanted to study, how you wanted to study it, with which teacher you wanted to study it.
Oh, wow.
And I think, had I not had that, I think I wouldn't be who I am today. I think it was just such a phenomenal environment to be in, because you really own your learning. You're not trying to clear a test or an exam. You're not trying to prove anything to anyone else. It's really like, can you wake up every morning knowing that you own the outcomes of your learning, and also the paths you choose, right? Like what you choose to invest your time and energy in. And it really gives you a sense of responsibility, for every day. And so um, and so I use that a lot. I was, if you think in terms of exploration and exploitation, that's a model that you use in reinforcement learning, which is like, if you're in an environment, you want to explore, which means you want to try a whole bunch of things, and you
Hmm.
want to exploit, which is when you find something that works, you want to double down, right? So that's kind of the two modes. And so I think I did quite a bit of both. And where I really chose to double down was in math, because it was really, I mean, what really drew me to math was not really the calculation bit, and I was not the kind of guy who could do complex arithmetic in their head very quickly or something. What I love about math is the ability to abstract out, and solve a problem at a level of abstraction, abstract out a problem, solve it, and then kind of apply it to the real world. And the real world, not just from a physics perspective, but also a social, human, like really the real world in its broadest sense. Kind of trying to scope, understand problems was something that drove me. And the other thing was owning outcomes. So that was something that was true in school, but then all through my career, it was then about owning P&L. So like you
Yeah.
want to own, you want to really be owning why you wake up every morning. Like, it's not about kind of slotting yourself in a little box, and you don't necessarily have to be an entrepreneur in the absolute sense. You can be part of an organization and still go at it with that mindset every morning. And so I think these are the two things that really keep me going.
That's it. It comes down to, like you said, it's all a P&L. It's only a hobby to a certain length of time. And then after that, the hobby's over and we have to make some money at that. So our discussions and what you're doing is all about data and analyzing what to do with it and how to work with it. And so maybe we should start off with the first word problem. The first word problem basically is you mentioned P&L. So in running a business, with regards to expenses, it's, as you know, it's all about ROI, return on investment. And the one key item, of course, is your P&L statement. One of the topics that's very popular right now, that's kind of fuzzy, it used to be called advertising. Now it's marketing, or more commonly called media. And in the old days, the budget line was 5 to 8% of the budget. And ever since everybody started migrating towards e-commerce, everything kind of got really fuzzy here, and it's not as definitive as it was before. And you'll see budgets of 10% and more, depending on the type of the business there. And so the key is you needed a really SEO optimization analytics. And talk about analytics, there's nothing more than tons of numbers and information about that. And it's critical data. You've used the word again, it's critical data. So me as an e-commerce owner, one of the business I have, we're small and we take care of our own SEO in-house. So we take care of our data, analyze it, and make decisions. But the search engines change every day. The Google, the Microsoft, YouTube, how can one keep up in that? So obviously when one would think that there's smarter people out there than we are. And so we've engaged a couple of times with experts in SEO, people
Mm-hmm.
that have all the data, have all the knowledge, and know Google's first name. How's that? And every time we've done that, the bottom line, everyone's tanked. And the experts didn't do very well. And we come back and take it again, and we do much better than the experts did. So the bottom line, we thought we had access to the same data. And obviously I'm in a niche market. I'm not selling Adidas tennis shoes. We're selling flow meters to the industrial market, for example, but there's many other people that do it as well. So the question I have basically is, why did the experts get it wrong? They had the same data, or is it just the way they have to analyze the data? What are your thoughts about that?
I think for this specifically, right, I think, like you said, you're in a niche, right? If you're in a
Mhm.
niche, right, by definition, there are not that many people in that niche.
Mhm.
And so like anything that has to do with your customer, right? So let's not speak about how flow meters are produced, right, or any product is made, but like anything that has to do with broadly the customer, what is important is to understand the customer, and the customer is in a niche. And so I think the reason why probably vendors or agencies have not been able to do better than you is because you know your customers, and you know in what kind of environment they operate in, what engages them, what they want to hear. And I think that is super important. And that's the reason, I mean, broadly, the argument in the book too, which is, hey, you need to think from first principles. There are no
Mhm.
best practices, right? Because what you will see a lot in, especially among people selling, and some of the best talent alive today is working in enterprise sales, at SaaS companies, is
Yeah.
working in consulting, right? And so
Mhm.
these are, I have, like I highly respect these people at the craft they do, but they're super good at selling. The problem is, if I come to you and say, hey Brent, I've got best practices for you, you need to boot me out because I don't know your niche. And so it does not, there are like the best practices I bring are in a certain context. That context is not your business's context. And so all that matters is how much does someone know your business's context, right? And then thinking from first principles, and then what someone could support you with is, kind of bringing rigor to like how you think from first principles, and where's the leverage, and what, how does value creation work in a certain, new paradigm, right, that is technologically driven. But the understanding of your customers is yours, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be in business, right? If you did not
Yeah.
understand your niche, you would not be in business today. And so I
Mhm.
think that's something to really keep in mind as a business owner, as a small business owner or medium business owner, or even a large business owner. Your context is unique. You know your context. If you're still around, means you're doing something right. You need to double down on that. And of course, I'm not, pull in people, right? Like pull in, targeted expertise, etc. But build your core strategy and capabilities on your unique understanding of your niche, and that's the second step in the framework, which is leverage. But we'll get there.
We'll get there. Well, that's great. That's great. And obviously, on that same note there, you're also saying that I have some data that I don't realize that I have. And because I thought the customer or the vendors had the same information. So I have to go back and further analyze the data that I have, the customer based data. And other than this is how I feel, that's going to be documented in something else to store. But one of the cool things that you wrote about your book, and I found it most rewarding, is the framework that you laid out, the format. So for you business guys that want to have a map on how to move forward here, you've developed a specific framework. What's the acronym that you came up with for your framework? What do you call that?
So the acronym is the first letters of the six words, which is SLASOG, and
That's
the
all.
six words are save, leverage, align, simplify, optimize, grow. And I think with some of the reader feedback I got, but also from my publisher, they said, "Hey, SLASOG doesn't mean anything. Can we juggle the words in the framework again so that it makes it actually means something in English?" And that's the point. This is first principles thinking. Like I'm not trying to come up with something that sounds cool as a buzzword. And so I kind of really that's why I drew the line and said, look, this is the framework. It's logic. It's extremely logical. It's empirically valid. We're not going to fool around with it just so that it's easier to like it's an English word that does not matter.
So you're not going to have any merch shirts that say /log framework on there?
uh yeah, I mean, like Google was supposed to be Google, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I
And
mean,
that's something.
yeah, it could become, I mean, Slashdog is not that hard to pronounce. I think yeah, let's see how that picks up, and then we could do merch
I
someday.
I saw that in your book and I started Googling. I said, oh, I don't know this word. I don't know this acronym. And then I finally realized it's yours. It's you. So there you identified that. So let's drill that down into a little bit here. So with that in mind, let's drill down a little bit of these topics there. So the first category you have is save. And the generic laydown of that is you said avoid costly groupthink mistakes and low impact strategies. You want to expand on the save category of your framework?
I think save is very important because I think that's where the scars come from. That's where the pain comes from, and what I've seen doesn't work. And I think the value of knowledge as in the first step is knowing what not to do, because that
What not
already
to
helps
do.
you, right? Very often people think, oh, this person's smart, they know what to do. Or very often it's about knowing the 90 whatever percent that does not work, because that
Mhm.
allows you to focus your aperture, right, on that subsection, right, that subspace of all possibilities where the value lies. And so the safe chapter is basically to say, look, and it's also polarizing in the sense of, I want to make it very clear to a reader, if you don't align with the way, like with the first principles approach, with the insistence on things that are empirically valid, if these are things that you're not interested in, you're just interested in some kind of fluff, then please put this book down. I don't want to waste your time. So I think the
Yeah.
save is really like a filter chapter, and it's basically declaring war on groupthink, because I think what's been going on is just people. love being in herds. I think we see that in, in the financial markets. You see that in all kinds of phenomena where there's this comfort of doing the same thing as everyone else, forcing yourself to look at your context and to think from first principles. And of course, there are a whole bunch of evolutionary reasons why we're all wired like that. You just, every time you just, a part of a group, you just feel safer. And so
Yeah.
what I dig deeper into in Save is a couple of approaches that I've seen people really use in their businesses, and those definitely don't work. If you don't even get started with those. That's the idea, is like save money by not doing this kind of stuff. So one common thing is, let's do the wisdom of, the wisdom of the crowds. That sounds nice, right? We will
Yeah.
crowdsource ideas. So you do like a innovation day, or you do an all hands brainstorming session or whatever, right? So you do some kind of thing at your company. You call everyone in and you say, look, we're an industrial company. I don't know, we're selling flow meters, or we're doing something else. We're selling technique, like in that kind of tooling. And but there's this thing, like things are getting digital, and there's AI, and I don't know what else, and throw in a couple more buzzwords. So we want to try to do that. So how about we, everyone sits down, and from the accountant uh, to the marketing person to HR to you name it, everyone sits down and starts thinking about how they could apply quote unquote AI, replace it with your favorite buzzword, to what they do,
Yeah.
right? And then you have like an Excel sheet at the end with 100 or 200 different things. And then someone in finance probably sits down and says, yeah, so what's this going to cost? What expected revenue do we think, or value this is going to create? Let's compute some kind of ROI. Then it gets prioritized, and then you have like a short list of 10 or 20 things, and then it goes to some kind of board, or one level below board discussion. And then it gets super political, like, oh, let's do two HR topics, let's do two marketing topics, we'll do two other topics, so that everyone's happy. We'll do
Yeah.
two product related topics. And that's how decision making happens. But if you just take a step back and think about like what is going on there, you want to, what, like, the whole point of winning in the data driven paradigm is about understanding how value creation works in the data driven paradigm, and figuring out how you can leverage what you already have to win that game. It's not about doing certain rituals. Like, we're not trying to like please everyone by asking them, how they think, what they think about random things that they necessarily don't have the context to decide on. They might not have the technical depth to know what's going on. They might not
Hmm.
have the width of understanding of how the business works to be able to say something meaningful. And so the underlying kind of foundation to justify why the wisdom of the crowd is better than an individual decision is, Condorcet's jury theorem. So this you have this in the US, right? Anyone who's seen legal, law and legal series on Netflix or wherever
Hmm.
knows how juries work and the whole
Yeah.
drama in court. But the point is, a jury kind of structure, where you let everyone decide, there's certain underlying assumptions that have to be true. One is that the
Right.
context is the same for everyone, right?
Yes.
All the jurors is sitting in court while the arguments are taking place, while the evidence is being presented, etc. Uh, does your HR person and accountant and marketing person and product engineer, are they operating in the same context day to day, right? I mean, that's not true, right?
Right.
um, they need to have a similar maturity in terms of knowing the domain. That's not true either, right? Because the idea in court is that the evidence that is presented is the only evidence that counts. You're not supposed to use any other information you might have, right? It's really just the evidence presented. But we all operate day to day in whatever we do, not just based on some like clinical notion of what evidence is, what is allowed and what we can decide based on. We use a whole bunch of other information and context, and so there are a whole bunch of assumptions behind this idea of why the wisdom of the crowds is good, that just
Hmm.
don't hold for decision making, for helping legacy industrial businesses decide how to win in the data driven paradigm. So so this wisdom of the crowd, I think, please don't do this. You will only lose money, and you will end up doing something stupid if you do this,
There you go. There you go.
right? And from there are two. There are two other things that are kind of very common based on this. One is like once you have all these use cases, etc., right, and you kind of have kind of scope out. So one is like then you say, okay, let's try to de-risk whatever we want to achieve with our data. So we will define narrow use cases and we will try them out, right? And this is what I call spray and pray, right? So
Spray and
let's
pray. Yeah.
yeah, spray and pray, right? Because that's exactly what you're doing. Because now you've crowdsourced all this stuff. You have you have your short list, and now you're politically trying to pick and distribute a whole bunch of stuff so that everyone's happy. But no one cares about the ROI. If I were to use an example, if you were to decide what you would invest your savings in, would you call your entire neighborhood out there, ask them what what stock you should buy or what bond you should buy,
Yeah.
and would you then rank those by who voted for what and then build your
Yeah.
portfolio?
Yeah.
Of course not, right? You're going to think from first principles and say, which companies would I want to bet in, right? What kind of debt am I willing uh, to invest in, etc. So I mean, why should decision making for data driven impact in businesses be different? Like, why should you suddenly make the entire decision making process super daft? That does not make any sense. And so this pray and pray is nonsense. It's so common. And I think the kind of profile that really fuels this is external vendors, agencies, consultants. Because if I were a consultant, right, and I wanted to sell you something, the best thing I can sell you is like a small kind of bait and switch type of thing. So I say, hey, let's do a small use case, and I will show you we can solve a small little thing that doesn't have a big impact, even if it works, and then try to do something multi-year with you, right? And for a SaaS vendor, that's perfect, right? Because now I don't want to cut open your business. I don't want to have to do with the complexities of your niche. I just
Hmm.
want to sell you a small little, I want to sell you something you can just plug and play, right? So I want to scope it as narrow as possible. But then if you scope it that narrowly, you can't really achieve much. So even in the best case, you don't get a lot of value.
Right.
And the other thing is like now, like what I said about bait and switch, right? Which is I usually want to, get my foot through the door by pitching something to you. And the next thing is I sell you a Soviet style multi-year digital transformation. This is one of the most ridiculous things possible. I mean, we've seen the Soviet Union didn't work out. So why are we doing multi-year quote unquote, digital transformations in industrial companies? It doesn't make any sense. Like this stuff cannot work. Like, do you even know what's going to happen in 3 years? Like, how can you even plan what you want to do in 3 years? And the second thing is because just the technology stack is changing so fast, right? So you're going to have sunk costs investments because you're going to buy the wrong shit. You're going to spend too much money and you're going to spend based on an assumption that will not hold anymore. And the other problem here is that you will over index on technology solutions, right? So what system am I using? What ERP system? What CRM? What whatever, right? Marketing tool, etc. Your customer in your niche does not care what systems you use internally, right?
Right.
You want to
Right.
you want to build your entire value proposition to them based on what they want, what they need, what delights them. That's what matters, right? The systems and all of that is just, that's really not important, right? I mean, if you can do it on pen and paper and they're delighted, that's okay, right? I mean, Rolex still makes their watches, like makes parts by hand, right? And yet
Hmm.
people, so it's really not, it does not. I mean, and also if you think about handcrafted stuff, right? Art, these are all, so it's not like just because something is technological that it's going to be valuable to your customer, right? You need to understand what brings them value.
That's right.
um,
That's right. And I
and,
have
and
I have a I have a Rolex in my drawer at home, and I have my iWatch on now. So this all comes down to needs.
yeah, and for what for what purpose? Like you wearing probably your smartwatch to measure stuff and to give you
Right.
feedback, and you wear your Rolex for
Rolex to go to
parties.
go to a fancy dinner or something like that. So yeah, they all have their place.
So,
Oh,
so the safe chapter is really about not doing a lot of nonsense that does not work, and it kind of try to kind of explain why it doesn't work, and the chapter really digs deep there, and it ends with also the emotional drivers, right? I mean, we can't really. It's not just mental decisions. Very often, these are fear based responses or excitement based responses to changes, and I think it's important to take those into account too. So that that broadly sums up save, which is save money by not doing stupid things,
Not
basically.
doing things. We made more money last year by telling certain customers, no, we won't sell it to you. So the same for Matt. So moving on, another topic you covered was leverage, and the leverage you identified and capitalize on your unique competitive advantages. So give us a little rundown of that.
Yeah. So I mean, why leverage, right? So I think leverage is super important. So what is leverage? Right? It's also something that people ask is, so it's about like how can you put minimum effort to get kind of maximum output, right? So you have that in physics, right, with Archimedes and the fulcrum. You have that in finance, which is like, when you have something with a high ROI, you layer up some debt on, right, some credit, and that kind of maximizes your returns. And with data, it's the same thing. You need to kind of understand how the data-driven value creation paradigm works. So I just do a quick breakdown of the industrial paradigm. If I'm making, like a physical industrial object, like this thing here, right?
This book.
Uh, this book. So this book has replication costs that are constant, right? So every time I print a new paperback, it's going to cost me a fixed amount broadly to do it. And it has fixed personalization costs, meaning if I decide to add an extra chapter that is different for every buyer, then I will have fixed costs associated with that. As we move into the digital paradigm, so let's say Kindle, right? I have zero replication costs. But if I were to personalize, meaning if I were to write a separate, like a completely new chapter for every reader, I would still have personalization costs. And now when we move into the data-driven digital paradigm, the replication cost is zero, right? Because it's kind of it layers on the digital paradigm. But what happens is that the personalization costs start going to zero. So what we're saying is like if I had a text generator, right, for example, right, that's the big hype now. So let's take existing LLMs, and if I train those on targeted ideas in my book, etc., and then I put it up on my website where you could prompt it with certain problems you have, concrete problems, then I'm offering you personalization that is almost free, right? I mean, there are small costs, but like it's converging to zero or whatever, right? So as long as it's not disproportionately high amount of text or too many queries, it's not like, as long as it's on just on the margin, it's like what equivalent of one chapter, I can basically offer you value, right? The same value as in this physical book. So I can give you this physical book as a unit of value. I can give this book to you on Kindle as a physical unit of value, or I can give you the Kindle plus, I don't know, 3 questions to my chatbot, right? So
Mm-hmm.
with these 3 things, I'm essentially offering value to you in 3 different paradigms.
Well,
But the way they work is different because in the industrial paradigm, and that's what legacy business is great at, right? Because they're already winning there. Problem is, how do you win? Like, what can you leverage to win in the data-driven digital paradigm? And there are a couple of things I point out. I mean, one is understanding your customer data. You just said you operate in a niche, right? And you probably dominate your niche, right? You're in a good position in your niche. That's because you understand your niche. So you really need to understand your customer demand. And that is super important because if your application costs go to zero, your personalization costs goes to zero, right? Then the cost side is irrelevant. What matters is the demand side, the growth side, right? Like, what do your customers want?
what do you
What
want?
brings them value? The
Mm-hmm.
more you understand that, right, the more you're going to win. The other thing is your um, your unfair non-digital advantage. What I mean by that is, as a legacy business, right, you have legacy assets that are unique to you, right? So your company might be around for several decades. If it's a family business, it's been perhaps around for a century. So it has a strong brand, right? Trust, etc. So these are all legacy advantages that you have that are non-digital because this company was probably founded 100 years ago, and so that
Sure.
trust has compounded, right, over a long time. Leverage those. Think about how you can leverage that, because trust is so important in the data-driven digital paradigm, because the cost of production is essentially zero, so people are buying based on trust. And that's not a physical asset, right? So all your assets need not be physical, is what I'm trying to say. Then you have your physical assets. You have your stores where you can offer unique in-person experiences to your customers, which a pure play digital player cannot. I have Walmart's winning playbook of the last couple of years. So if you look at the time from what 2000 to to 2020, right? For those 2 decades, it was Amazon is going to wipe out everyone and everything will be e-commerce, etc. It didn't. That's not what happened. Because as long as Walmart is trying to compete with Amazon purely based on price, they're going to lose, right? But
Hmm.
the moment they start leveraging unfair non-digital advantage, which is their physical stores, right? So now Walmart understands you as a customer, not just how you shop online on their website, on their e-commerce platform. They understand you how you buy or what you look at in the store, right? So they have a much deeper understanding of you as their customer than an Amazon can ever have, because Amazon is a pure play digital player, right? They don't know what you're doing in the physical world. And so leveraging your physical assets is super important. And so this can be stores, this can be this can be offices, this can be anything in the world of atoms. Because if you have that, then leverage it. Stop being embarrassed about it. Because I've seen a lot of businesses saying, oh, but I have these, I don't know, field sales reps, or I have this physical space. I don't, this is all very expensive, it does not look good from a financial perspective. You can either cry about the unique strengths you have, or you can just decide to leverage them to the hilt. So you can say, hey, I have all of this. What other value can I offer on top?
So the next item that you had was after leverage was alignment. And a statement that you picked up, a Zig Ziglar comment was, it doesn't matter how much power, brilliance, or energy you have unless you harness those factors and focus them on a specific target to accomplish your full potential. So what are your
Yes.
thoughts about that?
Yes, so if leverage is the is drawing the bullseye and saying, look, this
Yeah.
is how I can win, right? Then alignment is the tip of the spear. So you want to take
Okay.
all of that power, and
Drilling
you
it
want
down.
you
Yep.
want to really
Drilling it
point
down.
there where it brings the most impact. And so the alignment chapter, is full of military. The whole book is full of military examples, but especially the alignment chapter, because um, what more high stakes environment than the army, right? Like,
Sure.
uh, that's the justification, because if you think of two things, right? One is high stakes execution, and two, scale, right? There's no institution, no organization in the world that deals with both of these at the same time, the way any military does now or did in history. And so there are a couple of things that are super important there. I mean, one thing that I introduced, which is very common in the world of startups, right, of tech startups that are software native, is the idea of a North Star metric. And this is something that, I always say, don't copy paste startup playbooks to your legacy business, because you have legacy advantages that a startup doesn't have. You already have customers, they're starting out, right? So, like, when it comes to leverage, you need to focus on your unique unfair advantages. When it comes to alignment, having a North Star metric, right, a metric that captures the value you deliver to your customers, right? So it's not what you would have in a financial statement, or what you would report, monthly or quarterly. This is really about how can you quantify the value you deliver, and use that as a way to align everyone in the organization. This is something that software native companies have done really well, and the ones that have succeeded, and they've grown phenomenally. And this is a very nice alignment framework, I think, that legacy businesses can and should use.
Hmm.
And at a more granular level, right, at a team level, I think commander's intent is something, with the metrics that matter, is something that I think is really underutilized. Because what you see very often is people thinking in terms of goals and vision and roadmap and a whole bunch of stuff that seems more ritualistic than really alignment focused. And the thing with commander's intent is, it really helps everyone get the same context, get the same level of focus, and also understand, what the red lines are, right? How do you deal with trade-offs? What do you do if a lot changes suddenly during execution, right? So during the mission, what do you do if something changes dramatically? You
Hmm.
don't just want to understand, like, step by step, what needs to be done. So you're not just executing a certain fixed set of tasks. You're trying to understand the intent, right? So what that allows you to do in an organization is to um, through clarity actually to decentralize decision making, right? So because you have this North Star metric, because the intent is clear, you can really decentralize a lot of the execution and empower people to execute. So instead of trying to crowdsource, your winning strategy,
Sure.
don't do that, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to execution cannot be done, in a little corner. That has to be across the entire org, and it has to be, and you can also kind of align your customers to your mission, right? So if you say, I want to achieve this, I want to change the world and have the world be better in this way, and you can even put it out there publicly so that your customers know why you exist. You can do that for your suppliers. So like you can think of alignment even beyond just your company. So yeah, these are some of the ideas in the align chapter, I think, which are very useful.
So then you move from alignment. Then after we've done all that work, you said, okay, let's simplify it. So basically, you're reducing the complexity. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So firstly, what is complexity, right? And how,
Yeah.
or like, how is complexity created? I think understanding that is super important, because no one's sitting there at their desk thinking, oh, let me increase some complexity today, right? That's not how complexity is born. No one's explicitly really trying to increase complexity in a system. So the way complexity is born is through problem solving, right? So now
Right.
if we take a legacy business, right? We take your legacy business. It's born in the industrial paradigm. Something breaks somewhere, someone's going to try to fix it, right? So they're going to put a little bit of tape on something, right? Someone else is going to try to fix something else when it breaks. And so over time, as things break and as people try to fix those things, you end up having a lot of tape all over the place holding your structure together. And now, if we think about, you're trying to create value not just in the industrial paradigm, but you want to move and create, or you want to also create value in the digital and the data driven digital paradigm. Now, all that tape is really irrelevant, right? Because the tape was supposed to hold together a structure that might not even be relevant for creating value in the data driven digital paradigm. And so you can drop all of that, right? Why would you want to carry along with you things that are not relevant, or why would you include them in your decision making? And so the simplified chapter is really about rethinking what you want to achieve, right? So it's not just about a specific process or tool or system. It's really thinking about what are you trying to achieve and then re-engineering for that. And there's a great book by Champy and I think Hammer and Champy, Re-engineering the Corporation, from 1990 or so. So like, when computers really hit the average business in the US.
Yeah.
And I quote their book and some of their ideas, and it really inspired me, because what they said was, people were basically taking a pre-computer industrial process, and they were including, they were kind of putting digital peanut butter on top, right? If you see government services in many places, in many countries, it's like that. Like if I, when I try to register my company here in Germany, you have to log into 4 different government department portals, each one with their own login
Sure.
details. And then you think like, hey, I'm like, this whole thing exists to make my life easier. I'm trying to set up a company. Why can't I have one place to do it? I don't care that you have 4 legacy departments, right? That might have been true when government was set up, but like, it does not matter to me. Like, as far as the objective and the outcome is concerned, it's irrelevant. And so just because you have engineering and product, right, and supply chain and marketing and sales, your customer does not care about that structure, right? They're trying to solve a problem. They're trying to achieve a certain outcome. You want to make sure that their data-driven digital experience is super simple and helps them get from point A to where, from where they are to what they want to achieve. And that's all you need to focus on delivering. Forget the rest. Does not matter.
Then after you simplified it, then of course the next step after that is optimize. So how do we optimize it at this stage of the game?
Yes, optimization is super important, because what happens very often is, we tend as human beings to satisfy, and satisficing is a mix of satisfy and suffice. And there's a really interesting anecdote from the Second World War. So that's when the first American bomber crews start flying out of England and bombing Nazi Germany, and over time, the Air Force Command collected enough data and they figured out the following. So the parachutes of that time were pretty big, were cumbersome, took up a lot of space in the cockpit, and the bulletproof vests were not like Kevlar of today. It was metal sheets and very heavy, cumbersome stuff. And so in the cockpit, every pilot could only fit in one of these two. So you couldn't take the bulletproof vest, like wear that and the parachute, right? So there was a clear trade-off between picking one of these two. And what Air Force Command saw is that 70% of the time, the bomber crews would survive, because the anti-aircraft vest would prevent them from being shot at from anti-aircraft fire or other fighter jets attacking them, etc. And it's only 30% of the time that the parachute was really useful, because they had to bail, or the aircraft would crash. And so if you think of it like tossing a coin, 70% of the time you're going to be saved by the bulletproof vest, 30% of the time by the parachute, right? It might not be the exact number, but broadly there, right? So now the rational decision to do in that situation is every time to wear the bulletproof vest, right? Every sortie, every time you fly out, you wear the bulletproof vest, because that maximizes your probability of survival. Also, because each sortie is independent, right? It's not like which pilot is going to fly when, and which anti-aircraft crew on the other side is going to man which gun. Like, these are all, like, none of this is like planned, right? So the logical thing in this situation, if you model this problem correctly, is to always take the bulletproof vest. And what do you think the pilots did?
They take the vest, they truck the parachute. What did they do?
So 70% of the time they chose the vest, and 30% of the time they chose the parachute. So this is called probability matching, right? So what you say is, I have two options, and I know their empirical probabilities, right? And so I will match them. So they're randomizing, right? And now if you abstract out this problem mathematically, it's what's called a multi-armed bandit, basically like those slot machines in casinos, right? So you need to pick an arm, right? And so the two arms here that they can pick is, on one hand, the bulletproof vest, and on the other hand, the parachute. And if you are in an uncertain, like if your problem is not scoped and modeled correctly, right, then survival strategy is to randomize, because the moment you do something that's obvious, you become predictable, right? And so in an uncertain environment, the survival strategy is to randomize. The only thing is, in this case, they were essentially following millennia of evolutionary survival, but not thinking rationally. And this drove the Air Force Command mad, because the guys felt so guilty that these young boys were getting butchered. But if you think about it, right, this probability matching is so fundamental to decision making that it's been observed in monkeys, in goldfish, in ants. So there've been a whole bunch of experiments carried out with other species, and this is hard coded in nature.
Oh,
And if you
goodness.
think about it, right, and if you were a bird, let's say, and you could nest on a mountain, or you could nest in the valley, and let's say the valley had a lot more food, and would be, let's say every season would be a better environment. And let's say you decided, then the rational thing in that case, if this is exactly how the empirical setting was, then it's always good to go and lay your eggs in the valley, and raise your offspring there. The problem is, nature is outside your control, and so if there is a drought, or if there's a flooding or whatever, and if every bird of a certain species did that, then they would get wiped out, right? You need one bad occurrence and you're wiped out. And so when the environment is outside your control, when you don't know which environment you're operating, if you don't know the environment you're operating in, if you cannot have an empirically valid, mathematically optimizable model of that environment, then it's okay, to satisfy us. But most of the like we're not like hunter gatherers in the Stone Age anymore. Like, a lot of what we operate in a day to day in terms of decision making is not that random anymore. And so when that is the case, then stop satisficing, because if you look at two players, right? So one is maxing out their outcomes, and the other one is satisficing. Over time, their returns are going to go completely, are going to go completely apart, because the one maximizing returns is going to win much, much bigger than the other guy.
So then you moved on to grow, focus on customer demand, and embrace an abundance mindset.
Yeah, so this comes back to how value creation works, right? Across the different paradigms. The industrial paradigm is resource constrained, right? So if you want, like you want to sell one more flow meter, you need to buy it at a certain cost. Like your manufacturer has the same cost of has constant costs of replication, personalization, etc. When you're operating in the data driven paradigm and you want to win in the data driven paradigm, you need to provide value to your customer and obsess about them, because the supply side does not matter anymore. You exist because of your customer. And so you can provide, like, you can acquire your customer, or your mainstay can be a physical, industrial age product. But the value you can offer them in the digital and data driven digital paradigm is not constrained anymore by your resources. So you can sell one flow meter, but you could sell them expertise, support, and a
Mhm.
whole bunch of other non-physical stuff that is
Mhm.
not constrained by these resources, right? You could offer them training courses, a whole bunch. So you can productize so much more value and offer it in a personalized, right? So that is the data-driven paradigm, and with digital as your delivery mechanism. So in the data-driven digital paradigm, it's all about understanding your customer demand and delivering on that. And if you do that correctly, you will grow.
In conclusion, the case studies in this book, as you've indicated through your dynamic personality, have illustrated a wide range of variety of legacy businesses have adopted vastly different but always successful playbooks, empowering them to adapt and thrive in the digital, data-driven world. And your personality is also expressed in the book as well. I think you will find it a very interesting read. And then I guess my question to you is, who should be reading your new book, Data Impact?
Business owners in legacy industries, or business owners of legacy businesses. These are the two profiles, because also in terms of playbooks, I mean, I have winning playbooks of legacy businesses, some of them, almost 150 years old,
Mhm.
that evolved successfully, some of them a century old, some of them half a century old, across various sectors, right? So the idea is also to show across various sectors, across different types of business models, like all these other indicators don't really matter. If you think from first principles, there is a subset of how you can model and understand data driven value creation that allows you to win. And I try to highlight this through these different playbooks. And there's another set of playbooks of companies that are about a decade old, or a decade and a half old, or so who are not that old, but who are operating in legacy industries with a winning playbook. Because if you come with a software native mindset and try to operate in a in an industrial uh, paradigm industry. So it could be industrial, but could also be real estate. It could be energy. It could be a whole bunch of other industries that are non-software native. If you try to operate there with the wrong, with the wrong mindset, with the wrong approach, and with the wrong framework, you're going to lose. And so the idea with these playbooks is really to show you what's possible, and kind of inspire you to take what works for you.
Very good. I enjoyed our conversation today. And tell us, how can they get access to your new book?
Yeah, on www.ritvan.com. I have a little assessment also, because we live in an age where you want to try before you buy, and so I have a little assessment that you can take to see if this book would bring you value, or in what and how much and in what way it would bring you value. And if you do take the assessment, and one, it allows us to connect, because I'd love to hear from you. Modern publishing is really disconnected the author
Yeah.
from the reader. Because if you buy it on Amazon, I don't know who you are, and you don't know me either. Like, we have no way to stay connected. So if you go on www.ritvan.com, one advantage is that we're connected, and the second thing is, when the book launches somewhere at the end of April, it'll be available for just a very limited time, about a day or so, for less than $1 on Kindle.
Wow.
And I'd love to offer that, because I don't feel bad asking you to buy my book
For a dollar?
99 cents, because something or the other is going to bring you a higher ROI than that. Like, it's going to get you at least $10 worth of value, right?
There
So
you go.
so I think that would be great. If you do that, I can offer that to you. And yeah,
So,
and then it's not about the ideas; it's really about implementing them, executing on them, and creating value.
so we'll see it on Amazon then later in April then, right?
Yeah, it should actually be available for pre-order in Amazon, very shortly, like
Very
in a couple
shortly.
of days. Yeah.
Well, very good. So the man with one name, Ritavan, thank you very much for your time today. And we look forward to your success in your book. So I would basically like to say is, well then, if you've enjoyed our discussion today, go ahead and hit the like button. Just don't forget to subscribe. And with that, I'll see you in the next video, or maybe you'll just hear my voice, but you'll get the idea.